All right, thanks again for attending today. My name is Todd Domke. I'm the product manager for SOLIDWORKS and 3D Experience here at Hawk Ridge. You may know this month, we've been doing a series of webinars on SOLIDWORKS Premium is the focus, but we're also looking at, rather than just the list of all the powerful features and productivity tools included in Premium, we're going to look at it more in terms of focus on an industry and look at how some of those can help you solve some of your specific challenges for that industry. So last week we looked at aerospace, automotive, transportation, defense, and this week we're looking at today consumer products, high tech, and medical. And so you can go back to the June 9th webinar and get that recording on our website. And then next week, doing the same thing in the energy, plant and process, oil and gas, industrial equipment industries. Again, looking at how the specific benefits of SOLIDWORKS productivity tools in Premium can get you to do your job, get better products out and a lot faster. Okay, and the reason we're focusing on Premium is because this month, at least while it lasts, is a really good chance to get SOLIDWORKS Premium, pretty much better than we've ever seen it before, for the price of SOLIDWORKS Standard. Okay, that's really all you need to know. You pay for Standard and you get SOLIDWORKS Premium. You skip SOLIDWORKS Professional and go right to the top and get the best, absolute most powerful version of SOLIDWORKS. You save a lot of money and you get a lot of stuff. Again, we won't focus so much on the bullets as let's look in here and see what we have and how it can help you out. All right, so at first, just in general, looking at industries that SOLIDWORKS serves, there are no real handful of industries where SOLIDWORKS is better suited than others. It really, they set out from day one to serve all industries, so that anyone, regardless of what you want to design or make, can take advantage of these tools and give your company a competitive advantage and get your products to market sooner. So if we look here, really good presence in consumer, packaged goods, things like that. Life sciences would fall into that. High tech, focusing a little bit more on electronics. Again, huge presence there, but as you can see, SOLIDWORKS can do it all. All right, so looking at consumer products, what are the specific challenges that we have when we're working in this industry to designing our products, to getting them to market? Well, there's a big human element in consumer products. Humans buy these products and they interface with these products. So therefore, ergonomics, things like aesthetics are extremely important. Innovation is really important. Who can come up with the next best idea for a product that helps people or brings people enjoyment? So product innovation is massive here, and there's also, things change. So there's really short product life cycles. You got to get them to market extremely quickly, and then there may be a new one coming down the road, and so they may not be on the market very long, and so it's constant reusing the data, improving the product. Also, offshoring and globalization, that means we need to be able to communicate with manufacturers. We may be designing this product, but we may not be making it. We may be bringing in other experts, specialists, other parts of the world to help us bring this to market. So we need to be able to communicate effectively, not with emails and screenshots. We need something more than that. Obviously, these products with a short product life cycle, on some of them, you don't want them to be too expensive, so we need to be able to make these cheaper. We need to be able to develop it a lot cheaper so we can sell it for cheaper. And then again, because it's such a close human interface with these products, they're in your hand, they're on your body, they need to have that feeling of quality because you're so close to it and you see it and feel it. Okay, so we need to eliminate mistakes. We need to make the quality as high as possible so that it gives off that impression for your brand, and so that they'll keep looking for you for new products. And now the consumer products industry itself, there's a lot of ways that it breaks out. And so, it could be anywhere from furniture, very low technology things, but aesthetics, very important. Home and garden, personal and leisure goods. When you get into bicycles and things like that, we need to make sure things aren't going to break. They need to be reliable and predictable. Apparel and jewelry, again. And then the last segment here, consumer electronics. Again, big aesthetics, human interface aspect to these products, but this also focuses more on these always have some kind of integration of circuit boards or electronics. Okay, and that can be personal audio and navigation systems, PC peripherals. They all have aesthetic enclosures as well as needing functional electronics on the inside. So that means working with different design disciplines and needing to bring it all together into one product. Okay, so speaking of aesthetics, let's just jump into the software here. Definitely want to spend a lot of time in the software and a little bit less on the slideshow. So let's go to SOLIDWORKS. And here's a project we did here at Hawk Ridge Systems with our digital manufacturing laboratory where we're doing some 3D printing, and we just kind of wanted to scratch the itch and do a little design work and see what we could come up with on a little remote controlled helicopter. Okay, so very mechanical complexity, which SOLIDWORKS can always handle. But notice the fuselage there, not many straight lines or radii or anything like that. It's a very organic or very smooth flowing shape. So let's look at how we would make something like that in SOLIDWORKS to be able to come up with these types of shapes, aesthetic, reflect light well, and we'll look at how we can evaluate them too. All right, so if we look at our sketches here, first of all, we have some artwork. Let's go back and take a look here. So now we've placed in some artwork that we know how we want this to look, so we can use this as a reference as we build our 3D model around it. And the advantage here is on the creative side, Adobe products like Illustrator, we can bring in that kind of artwork. So if you're already doing that workflow, then you don't have to draw anything extra in SOLIDWORKS. You can just bring it right in, and we can start using that to guide our building of this model. Okay, so for this first surface, again, very smooth, nothing straight about it. How would we build that? So we have a very powerful surface feature here. Let's just clear it out so you can see how it's created. All right, so we have our scaffolding or our framework, if you will, with several curves and splines. And we can use this curvature combs to make sure things are transitioning smoothly. I may need to look up in this area a little bit more. Again, it's not ferrying people around. It's just a small little handheld RC helicopter. So as long as it looks good in the light, probably be okay. But again, using the artwork and then some sketches I've created, a boundary surface works in this method where we pick a curve or a profile, and you can see that it's knitting those two together. Okay, without any guidance right now, definitely not the shape I'm looking for yet, and we'll bring it down to this bottom one. Okay, so it's starting to take the shape. Now in the end conditions here of these boundaries, I want to make it normal to the profile. Okay, so you can see that it kind of has it come out straighter before it starts blending down now, and we're going to do that on both ends. The middle one's fine, but on the last one we also need it to be normal to profile, because again, I'm only making half of the surface, so I need a nice smooth blend over the top onto the other side when I mirror it. Okay, so that's direction one. All of those profiles are going one direction. So now in direction two, I need this curve back here. Okay, and you can see that really affected the shape, and now it gets it to wrap around just the way I want it. Okay, and I have another intermediate profile here, which again further refines the shape, and now I can see the reflection plot things are flowing nice and smoothly. It looks good. Okay, so that's our first, that's a very powerful feature, but very easy to use also. Okay, and we'll come down to another area here where we need another one. Okay, so we trimmed out, we cut away a piece of this surface, and now we want to put another kind of inflection out, sticking out of that surface. And again, the way to do that would be to go from one curve to another. All right, so you can see the shape, but it's not attached to the edges yet. So in direction 2, we'll tell that to attach there. Okay, so that's looking good. All right, and you can see that feature coming off of there now. All right, so that's another use of a boundary surface, and now we need to get a nice little smooth transition here in this smaller area. So we have another really powerful feature called the fill surface feature. All right, so this is when we just have a hole in a surface and I need to put a patch in. Okay, so we'll go from this edge to this edge. All right, we'll look at a profile view here so we can kind of see how this feature looks. Okay, well, it's doing what I asked, but that is not very attractive or smooth. So where it meets this boundary, not the one on the fuselage, but on the one here on this pontoon, we'll change it to, instead of just straight contact, now we want tangency. So you can see how it affected that shape, and now it's flowing smoothly between this one region to the next, although it drops off a little fast. And again, tangency is tangency, it's mathematic. I don't have a whole lot more control over that. So we can also do curvature continuity, which is a more advanced level of mathematics to continue that curvature and blend it even in a more smooth fashion, just like that. That's looking better. And then we can even go further if I actually know it's still kind of dropping off a little fast. This is the profile I want it to take. So we can put in a sketch, and then I can just put that into the equation, and now it'll maintain the curvature continuity and follow that contour going down. Okay, so powerful stuff, very easy to use. And now we can look at, if we roll all the way in, now we can evaluate these surfaces with some great tools built in. All right, first one, it's called zebra stripes, kind of a cute name, but it's just another word for reflection plot. So we can see how is this going to look when, in the real world. Okay, so we'll put some vertical stripes on there. We want to make sure everything's flowing smoothly. We have some other things we can do. Okay, we can put an image on there and see how that's flowing too. Again, we're looking for any unattractive inflections in the surface or wrinkles that I may have missed, because in real life that's not going to look very good. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Okay, so we can always evaluate what we have, before we go to production to make sure it's what we want. Okay, so that's just a quick little glimpse into just it's a great hybrid multi-body solid surface modeler. Great combination of parametric features for the mechanical parts, great surfacing tools, boundary surface, filled surface, other tools like deform and wrap, and projecting onto complex surfaces, deform, freeform. There's several tools in here to get those really tricky shapes without having to use another piece of software. That's really the idea. We want to do it all in this. SOLIDWORKS Premium is one design solution to get you all the way there with your product. All right, let's look into now, speaking of aesthetics, we also need to make sure, we want to maybe try some other materials, see what it's going to look like in real life. So let's jump into how we would check that. Again, we need to check it early in production, or sorry, early in the design cycle, so that we can make those aesthetic decisions early rather than later when it costs much more money and takes much more time. So we need to be evaluating this as soon as we get some models. So let's open up SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Okay, this is a standalone product, but included in SOLIDWORKS Professional. But since you would get Premium, it's in there. You get everything in SOLIDWORKS Professional in addition to what's in SOLIDWORKS Premium. Again, it's the highest level, and it gives you everything in the lower versions as well as more. So when I open my CAD model, let's take a look. First of all, here's what it looks like in SOLIDWORKS. Okay, I can see what it is. I think it looks pretty good, not terribly realistic, not a lot of emotion. Doesn't really make me want to have a cup of espresso right now, but again, I get a rough idea. The visualization in 3D CAD software in general, again, is really good. However, now it comes time to start seeing what it's going to look like under lights in different environments with different materials on it, so that we can start sourcing vendors and materials and start planning, early in the design phase, what this thing is going to look like. So looking at it in 3D CAD is not going to do it for us. So we open our native SOLIDWORKS model right into SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Again, it uses NVIDIA ray tracing technology, so it's as good as you can get. Absolute photographic quality. Let's zoom in and see what we can do here. Okay, so first we can go to the materials. And what I'd like to do is, kind of try some different colors on these side panels. Okay, so what we can do is just start trying different colors. First of all, I can just select this and start looking at different properties. We can just go right to the color and change that. What if we want to try like a little bit of a green or teal maybe? Okay, that looks pretty good. Right away we see reflections on it. We can see how things look. Okay, so you can experiment here all day long rather than having to make these parts and have them photographed. The workflow is like a photographer would do. Set up your scene, apply your materials, set up your cameras, and then take your shots. Okay, if we want to take up the brightness, or reduce and make it smoother, you'll see we'll get a much more accurate reflection in the face here. Maybe we want a little more matte. Again, instantaneously on the screen it's going to render it, and I'm going to see the difference, so I can start making these decisions. Let's turn down that color a little bit. Okay. Then we'll go to our scene. We can drag in several different scenes. There's a cloud library you're entitled to, as well as you can put in your own. And you can see when we bring in an environment, it's going to change where the lighting's coming from, the environment that's reflecting onto the model. Okay, so we just want like a photographic studio here. All right, that looks good. And now in the scene, I can also change things. Background color and the brightness. All of that can be adjusted exactly the way you want it to make sure you're getting what you want without having to hire a photographer. Sorry, photographers. All right, that's looking good. Now maybe we would want a camera. Okay, we have one camera on there so far. Maybe we'll put a few because we want several different views because we want to draw the viewer's eye to certain aspects of the model. Okay, and there are some post-processing options that really add some emotion and drama to the picture, and you can see how that, by darkening the outside, that vignette effect there, it really draws your eye right to the product and makes you focus on it. Let's lighten it up a little more. All right, that looks good. Okay, and now we'll copy this and let's do another camera. Okay, and with this one, we really want to maybe focus on a certain aspect of the model. You notice again, it's rendering real time at all times on while I'm doing this, so I always know what things are going to look like. We can also turn on things like a depth of field. Okay, and now when I just tell it what I want the camera to focus on, that will come into focus and everything else will blur out a little bit. So again, it's kind of my way of forcing the viewer to focus on a certain aspect of the design. And I can just easily change that. Now we'll go to the drip tray and you can see how that affects it. So now that in the cup of coffee or espresso is now in focus while everything else blurs out a little bit. There's some really, really high quality effects here that we can use to really show this thing off before it's ever produced, before we even have a prototype. We already know what it's going to look like and are making these important decisions early. Okay, now this is Visualize Standard, which is what's included in SOLIDWORKS Professional. However, if you do need more higher quality, or not higher quality, different types of outputs. Again, you're going to get the highest quality photographic quality static outputs from Visualize Standard. If you need more things like special effects and animation, you need moving, you need more dynamic outputs, I guess you could call it. There is Visualize Professional. So just know there are two versions of it. You're going to get the standard one with SOLIDWORKS Premium, or Professional that is, but in Premium too. And then if you need more, you can always just, they want to make, you have just what you need and not more. But there are options to go much further in your visualization. Just be aware of that. All right. Oh yeah, compared to that, night and day. All right, and one last thing here. We're talking about product reliability and predictability, especially on things that are going to be in a little, maybe a rougher environment. But again, with consumer products, there can be lots of different environments. So we have lots of customers who are bicycle accessory or full-blown bicycle manufacturers, and we can't have stuff breaking. So how would that work here? With SOLIDWORKS simulation, we can go in and actually we can do some virtual testing here so we know ahead of time if we need to make some design changes before we go and make a prototype. We don't want to make a prototype, find out the mistakes, and then make another prototype. We're trying to figure out those mistakes as early as possible, again, when we just have 3D models and haven't spent a lot of money on prototypes yet. Okay, so the way this would set up, let's just do a simple one here. This is a pedal and a crank and sprocket assembly. They want to probably go worst case scenario. What if we get someone really big and strong and with a really big power stroke? We need it to be light, but not too light, obviously. We can't have these things breaking, so we need to know that up front if our shape is correct for the loads it's going to be seeing. So the way we would set this up Again, we'll do a pretty simple one here, but you can get even more advanced. All right, we need to restrain where the fasteners would hold the crank to the sprocket. And we also need to do this hub here. Okay, so we're just telling you that can't move, which is the way it would be in its operating environment. Okay, so it's restrained accurately. Now we need to apply a force, or else what are we doing here? All right, so let's do 300 pound-feet. And it's going to be applied right on these two faces of the pedal. Normal to it. Worst case scenario, straight down on it. And we're going to spread it out over both faces there. So that's the total force on all those faces. All right, so we have a load. We are restrained, so it can't go flying off into space, and now we just need to run the study. And this is, what computers are for. They're crunching tens of thousands of equations right now to figure out what's going to happen when this load is applied to this 3D model. And right away we get a stress plot. Okay, looks like the worst thing in there is almost about 40 KSI. Okay, so we would compare that now. This crank is made of 6061 heat-treated aluminum, so we would want to compare that to the yield strength of that material. We also get a little bit of it's actually not a little bit, but a lot of deformation there. We can see that it's going to cause a twist in that, in the crank, which we would expect. And it's obviously not going to be that much. The deformation scale is exaggerated because if it's very small, you may not notice it. So they really want you to be able to visualize it. And then we can animate that again so we can really see how it moves and how that stress builds up. Okay, so great insight into your model. We can get some other plots, like a displacement. Okay, maybe it's not breaking, but it is going to flex. We need to know how much. So it looks like about 0.16 inches. So, again, for other products, maybe you just want to know, okay, it's going to move that much. We don't want to have anything too close to it, even though it's not failing. So again, some great insight into your product. And the last one here, this is what's going to really tell us something, is a factor of safety plot. Okay, so right away I want to know, what's the minimum? Hopefully it's not less than 1. Unfortunately, though, it's really close to 1. So no, it's not failing after 1 stroke. However, that's really close, and so we might want to look at beefing it up a little bit. What's nice about SOLIDWORKS simulation is that you get the linear static stress testing in SOLIDWORKS Premium, but you can always upgrade your simulation to do much more complex tests like drop tests, vibrations, non-linear for your plastic parts. Fatigue would be one I would do here. Now that we have the load, I would want to repeat that over several thousands of cycles to see if we're going to have issues down the road. And that's something that can also be done with the higher levels of simulation. So again, you can always find where, how you can improve your product early on. But a great plot here that tells us everything is yellow mostly, so we're in about the 3 to 4, which makes me very happy. However, right there in the crank, we might have removed a little too much material here, so that at least I know now. Maybe I'll add a little bit back in and run another study and see how does that improve it. Is it worth the increased weight, or do we need to look at some other things? Maybe I can beef up these fillets down here, just put a little more material in there. But again, really nice insight into the model, so I know I can start making some more design decisions very, very early. And that's really what the key is here. Okay. Okay, so for product design, there's a lot of things. The interoperability with a lot of the creative programs out there, so that you can take your artwork into your engineering or product design program and use that to build very beautiful shapes. Okay, and we have, like I said, hybrid solid surface multi-body modeler, lots of advanced features to get very tricky geometry in a more automated way. We're going to look at, we looked at the visualization, SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Again, as good as it gets for photographic quality of your designs. Simulation, as I mentioned, so we can test for reliability and predictability up front, nice and early. So now let's go in. Oh, I'm sorry. And here's just a customer success story, real quick. Most people, especially if you play computer games or simulations, CH Products is very big name, and you can see they have electronics. They have high demand on functionality as well as very aesthetic shapes or ergonomic shapes. So they're able to make use of all of this of SOLIDWORKS Premium to without having to use other pieces of software to get it done. They reduce their design time by 50%. I mean, these are real numbers. And development costs, again, if you're not making as many prototypes and physically testing them and breaking them, you're saving lots of money as well as time. Okay, and then the tools here are going to let you innovate more with some very creative shapes, and that may, that'll give your company an advantage and help increase your sales. So now the high-tech industry is kind of a sub-industry, or we're treating it here because, again, we only got three Fridays to do this and not 12, for one for every industry. Grouping these together because, again, the challenges are very, very similar, if not almost the same. In high tech, again, we're talking more consumer electronics, so still handheld devices, however, with electronics. Okay, some trends we're seeing here. Lots of, packaging is getting much more dense. Things are becoming smaller. Okay, as things get smaller, cooling becomes more of a problem, so that's where SOLIDWORKS simulation, again, at the higher levels, can do, fluid flow testing as well as electronic cooling. Always a focus on aesthetics and the short design life cycle again. And we're seeing things, again, as they get smaller and smaller, in the wearable technology now. And with a short life cycle, we need to kind of pay attention to not only what materials are used, what manufacturing methods and shipping methods are used to get the product out there, but what happens to it at the end of its life. Okay, and knowing that early on may, help us make some maybe different material, material or manufacturing choices to help reduce the impact on the environment. We can do that with SOLIDWORKS Sustainability, which is also a part of SOLIDWORKS Premium. Okay, but the key here is really going to be we have electronic components, so we're going to need to route wires and cables and harnesses. And SOLIDWORKS routing makes it extremely easy by literally just dropping a connector, wire or cable or harness starts out, and then we can tell it to go through clips or through cable management systems and to connect with another connector, and it draws the complex 3D spline that wire needs to run along, rather than doing it by hand, which is extremely tedious, not to mention not very easy in the first place. So it automates that. If you're using a lot of wires, cables, and harnesses, it's going to save you a massive amount of time. Then also SircuitWorks is what allows us to bring in circuit boards. Okay, the PCB or the ECAD design world, or CAD, is a lot different than mechanical CAD. And they're used to not talk to each other very well. The problem is the mechanical person is making the enclosure and the electronics designer is designing the circuit board, and we need to know that things fit. We need to know that cooling won't be a problem. So we really do need that ECAD information, that PCB design info. We need that in our mechanical assembly so we can do some checks early on. Again, we need to find out if there's problems early rather than after we're making a prototype. So let's look at SircuitWorks. How does that work? So again, SircuitWorks is going to allow us to bring in ECAD files through a neutral format. It's going to allow us to prepare it and then it's going to help us build a 3D assembly of that circuit board, which is what we need to do all these checks we're talking about in our assembly. All right, so it starts with, we're just going to open an ECAD file, which right off the bat that used to be a big problem. So we can now open these types of files. Okay, it's an EMN file. Now, this is not the model. This is SolidWorks previewing the file and allowing us to prepare it before we bring it into our 3D assembly, into our SolidWorks assembly. So again, you can see we've got full preview of the model, designators, all components, holes, plated holes, the board, everything is there, and we control what we want to see. If we don't need the designators right now, we can just turn those off. We don't need to see those. We can see the bottom of the board. Okay, so this board has components on both sides. We can also filter out vias and traces and other things in there. But again, we're just looking at it and telling it how we want to bring this model in right now. Okay, outlines like a keep out area here, this green top corner. All right, so before we get ready, let's filter out. First of all, as you can see, there's zillions of tiny transistors. Okay, that is really important for the circuit board designer. It's not that important for me in my assembly. I don't need all 10,000 of those tiny little components that aren't that relevant to what I'm doing. I'll probably need most of the big ones, but I really don't need every tiny one. So a nice way to help performance and to just unclutter the model is I can filter out components based on different parameters. This one I'll go just everything that's shorter than 1 millimeter. That's a really small component. And as soon as I enter that value, you can see the preview changes and they kind of ghost out all those really small, more insignificant components. So those will not be built in the 3D model, which is what I want. I don't need all those. Maybe outline. I don't need the keep out area too. Okay, so now that's gone. But that could come in as a model, so then I know I cannot have any of my enclosure in that area. So again, it's a great way to see that information and use it regardless of which design discipline you're in. All right, and with that, we'll now build the model. Okay, so we did our kind of halfway house here where we preview it and we prepare it, tell it how we want it made. And now it's going to build a 3D version of this, a 3D assembly, SolidWorks assembly of this ECAD file, of this PCB design. Okay, and you can see the progress here. Just got to build 81 of these components. Okay, so I still left quite a few on there. Some other advantages with this are that once we have this 3D assembly, okay, so with the board component and the display component and the battery component and the chips, they're all actual individual components that are built. And now it's building it in SolidWorks. So some advantages here, I'm now going to have an accurate 3D assembly which has mass and volume, individual components which can be moved around, and there it is. So it just took an ECAD file from Altium or some other PCB design program, and then now I have, from there, I have a 3D assembly in SolidWorks. And now this can be mated into my enclosure to check for fit and finish. An advantage of having individual components is now with simulation, I can put a heat power source on the chips, and then I can see how things heat up, make sure we're not too tight, make sure we have adequate cooling. Okay, that's really hard to do without this. Another thing we can do is Again, consult your PCB designer before you do any of this, but if we wanted to, I can delete those components. And now I can take another component and move it around. Okay, just to give you an idea. Let's say because of the design, aesthetic requirements or some kind of requirement on the enclosure, this component has to be moved over here, and I want to convey that to the board designer. Okay, instead of a screenshot and scribbling notes, and I want to be able to show them that. So with this, I can make the change to the SOLIDWORKS assembly, and then when I export it back to CircuitWorks, I've got a nice comparison here. Let's turn the designators on so we can see those. There we are. So you can see that B300, the buzzer, it's definitely moved from version 1 to my new version. So now I'm sending an IDF file from SOLIDWORKS back out through CircuitWorks and back to the circuit board designer so that they can now see that information and see what changes are necessary. Okay, so it's not just allows you to open a circuit board. Okay, standard SOLIDWORKS can do that. It'll create the board as one single part, so you can check your fit and finish. But if you want to do more advanced things, it's not going to get you there. CircuitWorks provides this true bidirectional interoperability and communication between the mechanical designer and the circuit board designer. So again, very valuable, and again, it compresses your design cycle because there's less back and forth, and we know very early of any issues that we have and can correct them early when it's much cheaper. All right, let's take a look back to here to medical. I'm sorry, another customer success. Again, just one of these, a projector manufacturer, and it says it all right there. They wanted to stop making just big bricks. They wanted to have more aesthetic or attractive outer appearance. So they needed the modeling tools in SOLIDWORKS, but as you can imagine, cooling on these products, they're trying to make them smaller and smaller, as well as brighter lamps for more clarity. That means lots of heat. So SOLIDWORKS simulation helps them there too. And you can imagine there's some circuit boards in there for the controls. All right, and the last little kind of sub-segment here is the medical industry. Again, they share many of the same issues. It needs a kind of aesthetic design language, or like a soft, unassuming, non-threatening design language. So we need lots of smooth surfaces to psychologically put the customers at ease. So again, aesthetics are huge. There are definitely electronics in here. Some of the things that they do need to think about, though, is regulations and compliance. Okay, the FDA doesn't just let anybody come up with a medical product and throw it on the market. There's lots of compliance. You need to be able to document your complete design cycle with revision control and data management and workflows. That's where SOLIDWORKS PDM comes in. SOLIDWORKS PDM standard is included in SOLIDWORKS Professional, which you would obviously get with SOLIDWORKS Premium. So that kind of a data management system and secure vaulting and revision control and workflow can help you meet those requirements. Okay, some of the challenges here are, again, patient safety. These medical device manufacturers are exposed to a lot of liability. And so they absolutely need to do as much virtual testing as possible to make sure their products are going to work as expected. SOLIDWORKS simulation helps there too. Okay, so within the medical industry, there's medical devices and equipment. That really is the sweet spot for SOLIDWORKS. Again, they're basically like very serious consumer products: human interface, safety, aesthetics, and compliance. Patient care centers, hospitals, and services. SOLIDWORKS could be involved with making fixtures and equipment for those types of places. Again, perfect fit for SOLIDWORKS. In the pharmaceutical manufacturing and processing, again, excuse me, that's mostly just industrial automation and industrial equipment, plant and process. So we'll touch on that next week when we touch that industry. So some of the advantages here, as I mentioned, SOLIDWORKS PDM, absolutely necessary to help you comply with FDA requirements. SOLIDWORKS simulation in motion, I'll show you an example of motion, helps engineers ensure that not only is a load not too much for a certain component, but it'll also tell you required loads to actuate a design throughout its range of motions, which helps you then accurately source motors and actuators and other components. Because aesthetics are important, we still need visualize, and we need to know early if something doesn't look right. Something else, reverse engineering with scan to 3D. The human body, there are not very many straight lines or arcs or radii on that either. I sure wouldn't want to draw one in parametric CAD. So a lot of times it's helpful to just get a scan of something, and then I just need a 3D model of it. I'm not going to change it. I just need to get a solid model so that I can integrate that into my design. Let's look at what that would look like here. All right. So these are some internal prosthetic devices, artificial hip and knee, all in one model here. Okay, but the key is we were able to bring in the scan of a femur and a tibia, which again, I wouldn't wish anyone to have to draw that. All right, and this is what scan to 3D allows us to do. It allows us to bring in those point cloud and mesh files that are either created in other programs or are the result of some kind of scan, which gives you those point cloud files, and then we can then turn those into solid models. But again, imagine trying to draw this. No thanks. So we can just bring it right in as long as we can get that scan file or a mesh file. And then we can use that to integrate some of our other designs. And with our assembly motion, we can make sure things are going to move the way we expect them to. So we can integrate the mechanical right into the human body here with this. Pretty impressive. Okay, no other way to get those kind of parts in there. And no one has the time to try to draw things like that. All right, getting towards the end, let's look at one more customer and case study here.
I started a guitar company because I love guitars and I had an affinity for making them. If I walked into a music store and played, everybody ran. If I opened a case of something I made, I'd draw a crowd. My name is Peter Smith, and I'm the managing general partner here at PRS Guitars. I see technology as tools. I think technology mixes with this kind of craft extraordinarily. We can draw a neck in 3D and look at any dimension inside a computer now, and it came originally from what I hand carved, but now it's in a computer model and we can play with it. If I want to make it 2 30-seconds thinner front to back and keep the general carve that I did by hand 10 years ago, no problem. If we want to draw something that's half a thou, we can do it. It all works. So for us, SOLIDWORKS is core technology for this business. Paul is a very visual person. He's not shy to try something new. He sees something, and he can see a change, and he can almost feel it by looking at it. So this allows him to kind of get where he wants to faster and get maybe something more accurate and more representative of what his desired product would be. SOLIDWORKS is a huge communication tool. I can't tell you how many times I've been to John's desk and said, take a changes, and sometimes some wild changes, and sometimes some completely new ideas. And it's much easier for him to communicate this verbally and us be able to communicate back to him and show him what he may be asking for by using the SolidWorks. Some of the challenges in designing a neck car are the tweaking the curves to get the smoothest finish that you can. So we'll start with curves to create the surface of the neck, and we use some of the features in SolidWorks to ensure that those curves are smooth. And then once we make a prototype of the neck, we'll take it down to the sanders and get them to feel it and tell us if there's any bumps or issues in it, and then we can go back to the computer and quickly take those issues out. For us, SolidWorks has changed the speed at which we do business. How fast we can design something we've thought of, how fast we can get an SLA of that part, how fast we can cut the part out downstairs, how fast the artist can get the instrument. We used to take months and weeks to go from concept on a piece of paper or some hand sketch drawing to now we're doing full design work inside of SolidWorks. So for us, SolidWorks is one of those tools that we use to compete. Speed and accuracy and art to product time cut way down. There are some proprietary ways which we draw guitars that are not in your video, which are in the show, the competition, how we figured out how to use your tool. Sorry, I mean, you're smiling, look at you, look at you. There's a few things on the camera, because we figured out how to use this program in ways that are so powerful we don't want to show anybody. And that's for your customers to figure out how to use the program in a new way. Seeing someone's excitement when they get their hands on something that they just couldn't put down, that is something that motivates us to just keep going. We want someone to pick it up and to fall in love with it instant. So knowing that we're a part of that is great, and that there's a little bit of everybody here at PRS in the instrument. There's a consistency that's brought with these new technologies that I really, really like. So SolidWorks is a piece of that train. It works. I mean, in the end, it doesn't matter what you want a tool that works. It does a job that you can do new things with that you never imagined. I think so.
All right, so that shows, again, just kind of how it all comes together. Just so everyone's clear again, we'll go very quickly through what is in SOLIDWORKS Standard, Professional, and Premium, so you get a good idea of what all is in this top-level package. So every version of SOLIDWORKS has all of the modeling tools you need, the sheet metal specific, surfacing, weldments. They have all these in there already. Then Professional adds some productivity tools to it, like file management, a components parts library if you use a lot of hardware. You don't have to draw all those components. That just comes with a library of over 1 million parts, like nuts and bolts and washers and all those standardized components that aren't going to be changing, and you don't need to waste your time drawing them. eDrawings Professional allows you to send non-CAD users 3D models so that they can be viewed and marked up and measured, again, with different locations. That's extremely handy. Professional includes the circuit works we were looking at, cost estimation tool built in for automating that process instead of using spreadsheets, CAD standards checking that checks your drawings for you rather than you having to do it one by one, tolerance analysis, so you can see where you can either tighten up tolerances and loosen up other things to save some money but still have your product perform, and the scan to 3D, as we mentioned, bringing in those extremely organic shapes either from mesh modelers or from scanned point cloud files. Don't forget the visualization. Again, that's huge for this industry. It's an absolute must, not optional. Again, design checker, rather than you going annotation by annotation in every view, in every drawing, you set up your standards and SOLIDWORKS will go check those against your rules and make the corrections for you. Task Scheduler allows you to batch commands. So if you want to print 50 drawings that are in a folder, you can set it to do that after you leave and not waste your own precious time opening each of those drawings one by one and printing them. Things like that. It's a very long list of tasks that can be done with batch processing. Again, that's a complete, just a productivity booster there. Automation, so you can focus more on your design and engineering. Tolerance analysis, as I mentioned, and the scan to 3D. Again, for wearables, implantables, things like that, having the human body model is extremely important for any kind of anthropometrics or ergonomics. Now, with Premium, you get all that we just talked about plus this stuff. Okay, you get the SOLIDWORKS simulation. That's going to allow you to do linear static stress. If you need more, it's available. It just depends on, what environment and what kind of testing your product needs. Not creating the time, using the time and money to create prototypes is huge for productivity, and that's what simulation helps you eliminate. Kinematics motion analysis too. Again, for sourcing components and motors and actuators, we can run these designs through their range of motion, and then we can see if what forces are required. The routing, okay, in this industry, it's mostly going to be your electrical wiring, cabling, harnessing. However, it also does rigid piping. Again, they're all similar. They're routed systems. They're either moving fluid or electricity or something from one point to another. There's also flexible tubing and hosing. There's ducting, cable management systems. It's all automated. You just choose the cross section and the function, point A to point B, and it's drawn, and so it's 3D modeled in your assembly, so your bill of materials is accurate. That's the key. Advanced surface flattening, okay, if we're looking at graphics or textiles, things like that are going to flex or go on complex surfaces, we need to be able to flatten those difficult surfaces so we can see where compression and tension is going to be, that we can get an idea on how we may relieve that, as well as getting the flat shape that needs to be cut, and we can use that to drive our CNC machines to cut those flat patterns also. Very high-end math going in there to flatten these advanced complex surfaces. And the assembly level cost roll-up, and we can do part by part in Professional with SOLIDWORKS Premium. It'll do an entire assembly in one shot and roll it all up to the top level. It saves you even more time. And then the sustainability is what we mentioned for looking at the material and manufacturing methods, the transportation and how it's used, as well as the end of life, what happens to it when it's done. And that allows you to make some decisions on those 4 aspects early on so that you can reduce the impact on the environment. And with that, just over an hour, sorry about that. And with that, that's how we're going to close with SOLIDWORKS Premium and how it can help you in the consumer products, high-tech, and medical industry. Thanks very much for attending today, and hope to see you next week for industrial equipment.